Rachna Singh is a colleague of mine. Uh, I knew her husband before I came to know about you.
Yeah.
He was posted in Delhi long back, and he was having an exhibition at IFX. I don't know whether you remember.
Yes,
So I
yes.
met him there for the first time. So this couple is very, very creative. The husband is a artist and she is into writing. She is a brilliant officer. इन्होंने जो हमारा डिपार्टमेंट का कोर वर्क है या फाइनेंस के बारे में उसके बारे में भी किताबें लिखी हैं और जिस किताब के बारे में हम लोग बात करने जा रहे हैं the book which will be in limelight and the conversation will be focused on this is on Raghu Rai, the famous photographer. The book is called Raghu Rai, Waiting for the Divine. इस book को Facebook पे मैं देखती हूँ कि हर दिन every day something or the other is there about this book. Either some conversation, some literature festival. This book is always in the limelight. So when I see this book, I feel so proud that Rachna is, making us very, very proud. Every colleague of mine, if the person is doing something else than taxation, that really brings me joy.
Thank you, ma'am.
So
that's very kind of you.
This is her book. She would be conversing with Mandira, and Mandira was a very, we decided to focus that the speaker should have a person who knows about the book, who knows Rachna and her book both. So the conversation should be stimulating, and because they are close friends and they know each other, she has read the book. So this, along with the tea, also relish the conversation between two very big intellectual giants.
I think the stage is really being set by the poetry in some ways, and I think when you listen to the poetry, whether there is an aspect of creativity and there's also an aspect of divinity in some ways. The search for something, meaning for a larger purpose, right? In all of your listening, and I think that is really in some ways what Rachna ji was doing. In if you look at the book Raghu Rai, where I'm a journalist, so all photojournalists are part. Of course, in some ways they with one photograph they take away what we spend all our time trying to write in 500 words. And Raghu Rai, of course, is really his ability to sort of do that is magical in a way. And I really wanted to ask her, because you hear about the craft, you hear about his photographs, you hear about him. But the title of your book is interesting. It's Waiting for the Divine. So why Raghu Rai, and what is the secret of the title of the book?
Okay. So I'll start first with why Raghu Rai.
Yeah.
Well, my connection with Raghu Rai goes back to 3 decades almost. I was probably a young girl of 16 or 17. This is in 1984. I'm talking about 1984 when the Bhopal tragedy happened. And that time, India Today did a massive coverage of the industrial disaster, and the pictures that accompanied that coverage were these searing pictures, And the cover picture on India Today, I don't know how many of you have seen that picture. Yes. It was a picture of a young child staring sightlessly into space in the rubble with a hand gently, caressing the forehead in farewell. So that completely, touched me very deeply, in fact. And the photographs were, of course, of Raghu Rai. So since then, Raghu Rai became a part of my gallery, personal gallery of celebrities,
Yeah. Wow.
And then in 2022, serendipitously actually, I connected with him again because I wanted to do an interview for the Wise Owl. So I just started that magazine. It's a literature and art magazine that I founded. And when I met him, my first question to him was, when you photograph such tragedies, how does it impact you? Do you have sleepless nights? Are you detached? So he said something which I found very beautiful. he said that the center of the heart of a creative person should be pure and unsullied. He says you can't carry the baggage of emotion with you, because if you carry that baggage of emotion, you will not be able to reflect it in all its truthfulness and intensity. So basically he would quote Kabir at me and he would say, Das Kabir jatan se odi, jo ki त्यों धर दीनी चदरिया. So he would say कि अगर आप emotions के साथ कोई चीज़ करेंगे तो फिर चुनरिया मैली हो जाती है. So which is why he talked about detachment, you know. And then, you know, that interview that I did with him had such a transformative sort of impact on me, you know. I would keep going back to that interview every time there was a, you know, to be or not to be situation, as they say, you know, in life or in my career. I would go back to that interview, you know, looking for nuggets of wisdom in that interview. And then finally one day, almost after a year, you know, I decided I have to share the inspiring life of this man with everybody, because it was like a masterclass of life lessons for me, you know. So that is when I approached him and I asked him if we can do that, and he very graciously agreed. After a little, you know, reluctance, maybe perhaps he thought I was too, you know, junior or too much of a newcomer as a writer. I don't know.
He was just really busy. I'm sure it wasn't
I don't know.
because
Whatever. I mean, it ended very well because then he accepted my request, and that meant that I would go to Mehroli, where he's based. You know, for almost 18 months, I would keep going there every once a month. I would stay there 3 days, have these long marathon conversation sessions with him, 8 hours, 9 hours, where he would talk about everything under the sun. He would talk about his craft, he would talk about his dedication, his life, his spirituality, his quest for divinity, you know. And then finally that came together in this book, Waiting for the Divine.
Excellent.
I think, you know, what is unusual about the book is that when you hear about Abdul Rai, you see the photographs, you always, you know, it's always really about the photograph. It's what you see, and when he talks about you know, what you also don't see, it's about a reflection.
Yes, absolutely.
But in, you know, Rachna has actually done that for you, for Raghu Rai himself. You know, it is about, you know, there has been, he in the book talks about कि उन्होंने इतने photographs लिए हैं, इतने negatives हैं, that, you know, his gallerist is still saying, oh my God, how much material there is, because he's done a couple of books, but he still has stuff which is untouched, right? But in some ways, Rachna has done that. She's brought a side of Raghu Rai that you really don't know, and you don't necessarily. I mean, the fact that you didn't know, you know, you're really intrigued about why you didn't know this, why you only look at him as a photographer, as someone who captured history or has witnessed history, and why don't you really know the other side of him? And I think that is an interesting conversation. And you know, we were talking about this, and I think, and I asked you this, I said, you know, there is something, of course, it is about what he said to you about the ability of, you know, sort of bearing witness or taking a picture where you're not clouded by emotion. But there is a reason you choose to write about someone, which is about you yourself. So while you're reading this book, you're also, you know, it's also about Rachna while she's not in the book. Okay, it is her that you're also learning about. So it's a journey for you to this thing. And you know, you talk about 1984, you talk about this thing. So can you really talk about why, I mean, apart from this, what was the journey like, and how did you transform from the 18 months from the beginning and till the end?
Well, Mandira, there were a lot of things that changed for me. It was like a pivot for me, you know, when I had these conversations with him. There are so many of them, very impactful conversations, but I'll just talk about one of them. You know, once we were discussing creativity and the legacy that you leave behind. So I'll share one very honest thing. Initially, I would write middles and articles for newspapers. But after a while, I realized that the shelf life of these articles was very limited. One day they were there and the next day they weren't. So in 2016, I started, thinking about this, and I thought I need to leave a legacy. So I need to put everything together. So I started thinking about writing books. But Raghu Rai ji, said something to me, and I realized this was not the right thing to do. He said that when I am writing a book, I am writing it or I am putting it together because it gives me creative fulfillment. It is not because I want to leave a legacy. He says, I don't care. I've done 60 books. He's done 60 plus books. He was working on another book on Delhi and on Varanasi. And he said, I don't care if people go through this book or they don't, they like it or they don't. He says, the point is, for me, it gives me an aha moment of fulfillment. And that is what creativity should all be about. So that made me, pivot. I then realized that initially I was writing for all the wrong reasons. I was writing because I thought I'm going to leave a legacy. I was writing because I thought maybe I'm going to become famous, not rich. Writers and poets never become rich, but maybe, some modicum of fame. I'm being very honest. Those kind of thoughts were there. And then when he said that, I realized that no, that's not what writing is all about. I have to just write because it makes me happy and creatively fulfilled. So that is the biggest lesson that I learned from Raghu Rai ji.
There was also an interesting, you talk about his spirituality himself.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes,
because while he has had, he's not, you really don't know, he's not a believer in the way that we look at it, right?
Absolutely.
Yet he's had, there is something spiritual about the photographs that he takes, whether it was the Dalai Lama who he has a relationship with, whether it was Mother Teresa or his Guruji. So can you talk really a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the book is called Waiting for the Divine. Now, the story behind this is that initially when we were putting together this book and thinking of a title, we thought of things like, behind the lens, behind the magician's curtain, and cliched stuff like that. So finally I asked Raghu Rai ji himself, I said, sir, aap bataiye, what should we call your book? So he just thought for a second and he said, Waiting for the Divine. And at that point, everything fell into place. I felt this was the most apt, title for this kind of a book. And I'll tell you why. Because for Raghu Rai ji, his life has been about a quest for divinity. And when we talk about divinity, it is not the typical stereotypical divinity of, religious icons that we are talking about. For him, divinity is something else. In fact, he told me this very interesting conversation he had with Amrita Pritam, which makes very clear what he means when he talks about divinity. He said that Amrita Pritam contacted me for an interview. And she asked me, Raghu Rai ji, आप दिन में कितनी तस्वीरें ले लेते हैं और कितनी बढ़िया होती हैं या कितनी अच्छी होती हैं. तो he says, I turned back and asked her another question कि अमृता जी, आप दिन में कितनों लोगों से मिलती हैं और कितनों की दर्शन पाती हैं. So that is the difference. So for him, divinity is the difference between देखना and darshan karna. So when he says, when you are connecting with every inch of space, all the textures, all the energies of a frame that you are clicking, that is when you connect with the divine. And I, in fact, would like to read out what he specifically said. The thing about this book is, it's not a typical chronological biography, third-person biography, nor is it just in English. Because my conversations with Raghu Rai ji were in Hindi, Urdu, English, so I've made this like a mix of all of that, So I'll just read out this thing that he said when he talked about divinity. He said, जब दर्शन की चाह हो और दर्शन होते हैं नेचर के, लाइफ के, तब कण कण में भगवान नज़र आते हैं. और जब डिवाइन एनर्जी आपकी अंतरात्मा से कनेक्ट होती है तो दर्शन लाजमी है. So this is his concept of divinity. And then at another point he says, I'll just read that out as well for you. He says that basically in life you need to have, energy and love for life. एक भूख होनी चाहिए. So उसके बारे में वो देखिए क्या कहते हैं. जिसको ज़िंदगी जीने की भूख लगी हो, नेचर को समझने की भूख हो, दर्शन करने की भूख हो, जिनको भगवान की मीराबाई जैसी प्रीत लग जाती है, ऐसे ही हमारी जो प्रीत है वो धरती से लेकर आसमान तक और मेरे अंदर से लेकर बियॉन्ड दिस वर्ल्ड हर चीज़ को जानने समझने की भूख है, एक्सप्लोरेशन की भूख है. और इसी कारण से उनकी जो क्वेस्ट ऑफ डिविनिटी जिसकी बात करते हैं, यही क्वेस्ट ऑफ डिविनिटी है. इट इज़ नॉट अबाउट कि आप जाके तपस्या कर रहे हैं तो आपको भगवान मिल रहा है, या राम रहीम इन चीज़ों में नहीं वो विश्वास करते. और इसीलिए शायद उनका जो कनेक्शन है मदर टेरेसा के साथ या दलाई लामा के साथ, वो कनेक्शन बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग है.
You talked about his connection with divinity too, and the fact that there is this, for example, with his Guruji. Okay, when you talk about the relationship that he has. I was wondering how much of that spirituality and how did that idea of it resonate with you, and how much of it is how did it either alter your way of looking at spirituality, or how did it touch you, and how did it sort of speak to you?
Yeah, it resonated very deeply with me, Mandira. Perhaps because at some kind of a subconscious level, I also do not believe in icons of religion. For me, unity of religion is what we talk about. Everyone has their faith, and nobody should sit in judgment on anybody's faith. So essentially, when I talk about spirituality, and when he talked about spirituality, he talked about spirituality in humanity in the sense that Mother Teresa talks about it.
Yeah.
Compassion,
Yeah.
Faith, belief in the power of prayer, basically. With Mother Teresa, he's mentioned a lot of examples where he talks about the power of prayer. And he says he learnt that power of prayer from Mother Teresa. With His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, it was the same thing. Again, Dalai Lama does not believe in, religions as we see it in the world or in our social framework. And that resonated with me because I also believe in exactly the same thing. There's a lot of polarization happening along religious lines. I don't believe in it, neither did he believe in it, which is why we connected so deeply, and which is why I was able to write this, biography. And I don't know, it's like a badge of honor that I'm wearing. Initially, there were people who said that no, write a biography which is typically third person, you know. And they said, no, why don't you do this? There's this biography on Ravi Shankar by Kraske, and they would all tell me, oh, go back to Kraske. And when I went back to it, that had, I'm not dismissing that, it's a different kind of writing. I'm not saying it is incorrect, but it was not the kind of writing that I wanted. And I'll tell you also why. Because when I had these conversations, I was also a typically brought up English literature kind of person who believed, okay, a biography has to be written so and so, you know. But when I had these conversations with Raghu Rai ji, and when I went back home and I tried to convert those conversations into a third person narrative, it completely lost its vigor, its energy, everything was gone. And almost for 2 months I struggled with that. And then I finally thought that when Raghu Rai ji is so innovative in everything, he believes in, breaking, flaunting the convention. So I thought, why not that I do that as well. So I did that as well. And when I took the first draft to him, which was on the spiritual mentors, that was the first chapter that I showed him. His response was like a badge of honor. He said, "Isme se meri mehak aati hai." And I said, that validates everything. I don't care what the publisher say. I don't care what my literary agent says. This is the way I'm going to write it. And so that's the way I wrote.
But there's also aspects about him that nobody else has been able to talk to. He talks about his fault lines. It is, and I wanted to ask you about, I think at some point of time in the book you say that you ask him and you worry about whether you have overstepped, whether it looks as if you're prying, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And there is that sort of, you know what I mean? There is that line which, as writers, you have to have, but as a person, you sort of necessarily might not want to know. You want to see, right? And how did that work? You know, the fact that he talks about his childhood,
Yes.
his mother, his relationship with his brother. So can you?
See, as far as his childhood is concerned, he was very reticent. He didn't want to talk about his childhood. In fact, when I first started the conversation, I started by telling him that there is very little about your childhood. You know, I've ferreted out everything, can't find anything on your childhood. He sort of sidestepped the issue and he said, let's talk about Guruji. And then when again I tried it, he said, no, let's talk about my creativity, you know. So he kept sidestepping the issue. So I felt that perhaps there is some kind of a traumatic incident he doesn't want to talk about, doesn't want to share. And I let it be, but slowly he came out, you know, he started talking about it. He talked about, you know, he was in Pakistan, he was born in Jhang in 1942. So when the partition happened, he says that there were a lot of Hindu households around and the houses went up in flames, and one night they had to creep out of their house and they had to come to Amritsar. So probably that, you know, image of the houses going up in flames, wo jo abad ghar the, wo suddenly barbad ho gaye, you know, that kind of the pain and trauma, he carried that into his adulthood, which is why when he took photographs of the Bangladeshi refugees, I don't know how many of you have seen his photographs, they are absolutely searing pictures of the empty vacuous eyes of those people who are coming into the country. So that intensity, probably he couldn't have captured that intensity if it was not for his traumatic childhood. And then he was not very comfortable talking about his first marriage either.
Yes.
A lot of fault lines in the marriage. He was trying to be very objective about the entire thing, not laying the blame on, you know, his first wife's feet. He said that both of us were to blame, and he also said that I carried a part of her into my life beyond, and she probably carried a part of me into her life beyond. So these two things, and of course then his brother, his fallout with his brother. Now his brother was actually his creative mentor, S. Paul. He's also a great photographer. He was the chief photographer with Indian Express, and he says he gave me my first camera. In fact, the funny thing is that Raghu Rai is basically a civil engineer. His father wanted him to be an engineer, so he said we never questioned our parents in our time, so he became an engineer. But he says it was soul-sapping work for me. I didn't like it at all. So he gravitated towards, you know, photography. And he says the first photographs that he took, again, I don't know how many of you know, it is the baby donkey. And
I'm going to try and show it because we thought we'd show some photographs
Yeah.
and then
Yes,
maybe talk a little bit about the photograph.
Particular photograph.
Yeah, this is his first photograph, and I was going to ask her to talk a little bit about some photographs that she really likes and how that reflects about his life. So we can talk a little bit about his creativity.
Right, let's talk about this photograph.
So basically, let me just tell you the story behind this photograph. My favorite photographs, there are a lot many.
Which we will talk
not this one perhaps, but this was his first photograph, and it was featured in Times London. Now he says this is such a, you know, it is like destiny nudged him into photography, you know. He says that I used to stay with my brother, and Yog Joy, he is a photographer with the Tribune, he would come to their place very often. And one day he said Yog Joy was going to his village near Rohtak, and he said, I don't know, for some reason I decided to go along with Yog Joy. And he says that when I went there, before going, I asked my brother for a camera. So he gave me a small camera, fixed the aperture speed and all of that. He says, because I didn't know anything about it, just told me this is how you are to use the camera. He says, I went there, and in the evening, he says, I put the camera around my neck, and I maze ke liye, he says, I started going, and all the children there started saying, camera wala aaya, you know. So he said that then there was an old woman there who was very lovingly looking at the little children who were yelling, camera aaya, camera. So he says, I don't know, there was some instinct that made me just click that picture, and then I asked them, okay, I asked the children to flank the old woman, and wo ganna chup rahi thi, aur wo usi tarah unhone, very naturally he took that photograph. And then he says ke Yogjoy was still busy, so I thought what else to do. He started looking around. He says he saw a little baby donkey, so he went up trying to photograph him. The baby donkey was a timorous little being. He started running around. Raghurai started running after him. Now the children got very excited. They thought this is a lot of. They started clapping. Ke, come on. They thought it was a great joke. He started playing up to the gallery. He also started running. So ultimately he says the baby donkey just stopped and looked at me. It was like he was weary, and he said, what do you want? That kind of a look. So he says he had this indescribably funny look on his face, and he says I just instinctively clicked that picture.
He gave up.
He gave up, basically, resigned acceptance. So he says, then when I went back and showed my brother those pictures, my brother said, ये तो कमाल की pictures तुमने खींची हैं. And he says he used to send his pictures to Times London. Times London at that time would feature half a page of a picture which was unusual or ironical or something like that. So he says अपनी photographs के साथ उन्होंने मेरी भी ये 2 photographs भेज दी. Next week वो ये वाली छप गई उनकी baby donkey. Everybody was like, wow. He thought it was a coincidence. He ignored that. Then he said next week वो दूसरी बूढ़ी अम्मा वाली भी छप गई. Then everybody was like नहीं. And he said I also felt के perhaps I do have some kind of creativity. So that's how and he was in his early 20s then. That is the first time he picked up a camera. I mean, you would think आपको लगता है ना कि होनहार बिरवान के होत चीकने पात, you think कि बचपन से ही जो होगा उसको आता होगा या उस टाइम डेडिकेशन से सीखा होगा. But he started so late in his life, and in his late 20s तो उनको पद्मश्री भी मिल गया for the stellar work he did with the Bangladeshi refugees. Yeah.
This is some of the Bangladeshi. This is Bangladeshi. Yeah. This is what he was saying. So he did a whole series on them.
Yeah.
And so I think we should also talk about this is a picture that we all know, and it's very iconic.
MS Subbulakshmi.
And I think if you ever think of MS Subbulakshmi, this is possibly the only image that you really have.
Yes, absolutely.
Of hers.
Yes.
And would you like to talk about his relationship with music?
Yes, absolutely. He says that as a child he didn't like maths, he didn't like science. The only thing he liked was drawing and music. And he said मैंने एक हारमोनियम भी खरीद रखा था, एक वायलिन भी खरीद रखा था. And every time मुझे कोई पूछता कि बड़े होके क्या बनोगे, तो I would say मैं musician बनूंगा. And he says उस टाइम पे म्यूजिक का प्रोफेशन was not regarded as very respectful. मरासी कहते होते थे. तो कहते my father learnt about it. He was livid. He said तुम सबको क्यों कह रहे हो कि तुम मरासी बन रहे हो, तुमने तो पढ़ना है. तो he says तब से मुझे म्यूजिक का बहुत शौक रहा है. एंड अब तो आप जब भी मैं उनके पास जाती थी, म्यूज़िक उनका चल रहा होता था, या बड़े गुलाम अली खां साहब का चल रहा होता था, मुनव्वर अली खां, आमिर खां, वो जो पुराने सारे बड़े बड़े उस्ताद थे उनके बारे में, वो उनको बस सारा दिन सुनते रहते. उनकी आप रिंग टोन सुनो, उसमें भी बड़े गुलाम अली खां आपको सुनने को मिलते हैं. तो उसके बाद व्हेन ही बिकेम अ फोटो जर्नलिस्ट, ही सेज हमारे पास ये चॉइस होती है कि वी कैन पिक अप व्हाट वी वांट टू डू. So he says I would opt for doing photographs of these music concerts. तो उसके दौरान he says मैं बहुत लोगों को मिला. मल्लिका अर्जुन मंसूर जी की खास वो बात करते हैं, तो कहते हैं वो इतनी उनके नुआंसेस होते थे उनके गाने में. तो उन्होंने कहा कि मैंने मल्लिका अर्जुन मंसूर जी से पूछा कि आप मुझे ये बताइए कि आपके गाने में इतने डिफरेंट टोनल क्वालिटीज़ और नुआंसेस कैसे आते हैं. तो कहने लगे, उन्होंने मुझे कहा कि मैं 5 घरानों के जो गुरु हैं उनसे मैंने म्यूज़िक सीखा है. तो वो जो 5 घरानों के जो गुरु हैं उनका जो सारा म्यूज़िक है वो मेरे म्यूज़िक में रिफ्लेक्ट करता है. तो फिर रघुराय जी हंसने लगे, कहने लगे कि सेम थिंग इज़ विद मी. उनके तो 5 घराने थे, मुझे तो कहते हैं मैंने पता नहीं कितने म्यूजिशियंस को सुना है, और उनकी सबकी जो एनर्जी है वो मेरी फोटोग्राफ्स में रिफ्लेक्ट करती है.
ब्यूटीफुल.
उन्होंने किशोरी मुनकर की ली हुई हैं फोटोग्राफ्स, बहुत सारी सबकी ली हुई हैं इनफैक्ट
So I want to talk about this photograph, and I want you to talk about why this photograph, because I think between this and the picture that he has of I think of Mother Teresa, which is not in this book, but is the iconic image of Mother Teresa with the hand, in prayer. Is a
but not that.
There is one here which is also an iconic image, but the one of her in prayer is a Raghurai picture, right? And there is a story about how he got that. And there is a story of how he got this too. It's sort of a determined persistence.
Yes.
And can you really talk a little bit about that and how he sort of managed to, how he refused to take no for an answer in some ways.
With Mother Teresa.
Yeah, as well as here. I mean, this was also not taking
post Operation Blue Star.
how he hid the thing.
So I'll talk about that.
Oh yeah.
This is a car.
Yes.
So Raghurai ji told me that he had been following the militancy, stream right from the beginning, right from the time when Pindrawale came on the scene. And then then of course Operation Blue Star happened. And if you remember, I was I think in my 12th that time or 11th. The photographs that came out, the first time the photographs that came out of the desecration of the Golden Temple were photographs taken by Raghurai ji. So I remember my dad was in the army then, and I remember how people used to, regard army people with a lot of hate and hostility, Because I remember once I went with my father to a booking me, and that's how he says I took all those pictures, took them back, and जब छप गई तो कहते उधर से phone आ गया ऊपर से कि how did your photographer enter the premises? How did he manage to get these pictures? Did he seek permission? So even I asked him, I said, sir, आपको डर नहीं लगा जब आप अंदर गए वहाँ पे? अगर पकड़े जाते तो? He says, नहीं, मुझे डर बिल्कुल नहीं लगा. मैंने कहा क्यों? कहने लगे हमारी सरकार है, हमारी आर्मी है. अगर worst case scenario में निकाल के वो खत्म कर देंगे, expose कर देंगे, expose कर देंगे और क्या करना था? कहते हैं कि she is my spiritual mentor. तो कहने लगे पहली बार तब होता था मैगजीन जूनियर स्टेट्समैन करके होता था, and somebody called Desmond Boyd was the editor of that. And he says that time Mother Teresa was not very well known. So he was doing a story on Mother Teresa. And he called me in Delhi and he said, "Hey Raghu, यहाँ पे आ जाओ. There is this wonderful lady. She's not very well known, but आप आ जाओ and I'll introduce you to her. And we need to do a cover story for her." So कहते जब हम गए, she was in a tiny little ramshackle सा room था, ऐसे टूटा फूटा सा desk था, 3 rickety chairs were around. She was sitting on one and 2 were for the guests. And he says there was an entryway and there was another entry into the compound of the, Nirmal Vidya, as it was called later. So उसमें वो ऐसे half curtain सा झूल रहा था. So कहने लगे कि मैं देख रहा था और वो बात करने लगे Mother Teresa and Desmond, and I started looking around for a frame for my picture. And he says वो एकदम flutter हुआ curtain and I saw these 2 of them, 2 sisters on a balcony there reading their prayer books. So he said, I thought what a wonderful picture is going to make. He says कि मुझे लगा वहाँ से frame ठीक नहीं आएगा. He dived, under his table to get the right frame. And suddenly he disappeared out of view and Mother Teresa was horrified. She says, what the hell are you doing? Where are you? So then he came out, then he realized that he had probably stepped on her toes or, she had not behaved in a very, it was like not the thing to do. So he said, Mother, those sisters, they look like angels. So then he says that Mother was sort of reassured. She says, okay, that's the way. So he says, ऐसी थी Mother. अगर आप उनको समझा दो किसी चीज के बारे में, then she's on your side. So that is one of the stories. I think you should all pick up the book and read it.
And there are lots of stories.
Let me thank Mandira. I'm not going to thank you because I feel that you are equally a host here. Feel free whenever you are in Delhi, both of you, then come over and we can have more sessions about books. The way you narrated, everybody is now interested in the book. We all have to learn how to, talk about your book. 2 things which really, I know Raghurai very well because, he's always there in Delhi, art fraternity, art openings पे आते हैं और photography show मैं भी देखने जाती हूँ. उनके वहाँ मेहरौली के ऑफिस में भी मैं गई हूँ और उनसे कुछ डिस्कस भी किया था. I did 3 books on photography. One was Ladakh, and I took advice from Avinash Pasricha. And then the second book is about Jammu and the third book is about Kashmir, because I was posted in that area for almost 2 years. So when I took photographs of Ladakh, then I showed it to Avinash. He said ki it's not a photographer's photograph, it is a painter's photograph. So you do your book in your own way. So, and the second other thing which is which I have seen is common with Raghu Rai is his way of looking at spirituality. I consider myself as a very spiritually inclined person, and I also feel all creative people do not belong to any religion or any country. We are world citizens. We are here to bring compassion to this world. We heal through our creativity, and we allow others to enjoy our works and heal themselves. So that's the spirit. Raghu Rai has always been talking about that. In the Ladakh book, because I had clicked the photographs of Dalai Lama's house there, so I requested him to write the foreword. He wrote the foreword, and he said that it's a timeless painter's book. So I also am blessed by Mother Teresa, who inaugurated my first exhibition of paintings, and I was very, very, very close to her. Very close to her. So I'm also coming out with a book, which is my memoir, where there's one chapter on Mother Teresa.